This is a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7, with over 9 hours of video presentations. Now don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts so as not to miss a thing, as well as visiting our YouTube channel. Hello again and welcome to another podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. As usual, Barney, my red Labrador, is here to offer his advice and to keep an eye on content. And by the way, Barney and I would really appreciate it if you would like to write a review. If you're new to Duncan Cartlidge Online podcasts, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, as well as catching up with the previous episodes. If you are already a subscriber, a big thank you for your support. Please spread the word. Now, in this absolutely jam-packed episode, we will be discussing what's with the AI hype, extensions of time, and PPP. Will it, won't it make a comeback? Construction is at an inflection point. Materials and labour costs are rising, with a forecast 5 to 7% increase in 2025. More people are leaving the industry than joining at a time when there is a massive skill shortage, particularly for roofers, plumbers and general labourers, against the government's promise to train 40,000 more construction workers by 2028. So much for building new towns. Modular construction still fails to impress, with specialist companies regularly turning their backs on the market. Housing starts are at an all-time low. Did you catch Steve's car crash interview on GB News? But not to worry, there's an AI revolution on the way. So, what's with the AI hype? Generated artificial intelligence is not new to construction. I remember in the 1990s, several so-called expert systems were developed by the RICS in collaboration with the University of Salford. They worked on the basis that a number of human experts inputted their solutions to a set of scenarios, such as which procurement path to use and in what situation, into the system's inference engine. The expert system user then answered a set of questions, and hey presto, the system came out with a solution. Although it has to be said, the solution was in the main obvious even before the expert system had spat out the answer. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no Luddite. I have, during my career, welcomed many new developments including computers, software packages and IT, but I just wonder what the impact of AI will be on construction once the dust has settled. Remember the predictions when BIM first hit the scene? Goodbye QS, you're toast in this brave new world. Thinking back to the millennium, remember the millennium bug? Organisations spent loads of money in an attempt to neutralise a non-existent virus that would, according to the experts amongst other things, cause planes to drop out of the sky at 1 minute past midnight on January 2000. One thing AI has done is to spawn a plethora of research papers. The clamour to jump on the generative AI bandwagon reminds me of the rush 30 years ago to join the e-commerce world. In the 1990s, the must-have toy for consultants and contractors was a website, and to get an online presence or be left behind. The word was the majority of business would in the future be carried out online, but as we now know, construction-based websites are not used for e-commerce, but mainly for promotion. Nevertheless, according to Building, that's the same Building that predicted the demise of the QS on several occasions, 84% of the top 150 consultants intend to spend on AI in the future, with digital optimism being at an all-time high. Currently, the technical press is full of articles with pictures of rather smug-looking people telling readers that we are already too late, although many organisations who have enthusiastically tried to sell AI use words like potential, expect and likely. A bit like the Millennium Bug, really. My inbox is cluttered with invitations to TechFest events hosted by, and I quote, senior AI decision makers. Now, don't ask me how anybody could possibly know this, but the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, has produced a spreadsheet listing the UK regions most likely to be impacted with AI, with, for example, 8,363 jobs under threat in Stoke-on-Trent. In addition, the ONS has predicted that quantity surveyors will have to, wait for it, a 0.273715% chance of being automated, with construction project managers having a slightly better chance at 0.25037%. You know, I'd take that. It's reported by some early adopters of AI that they are enjoying cost reductions on things like routine admin and manual estimating. Now, I remember the call for the QS to be confined to history when it was stated that BIM could produce bills of quantities, but after a few attempts it became apparent that BIM-generated bills needed a QS to check the output. Would you let an AI-generated estimate leave your office without human oversight? Answers on a small postcard, please. The RICS issued a rather level-headed global professional statement in September on the responsible use of artificial intelligence in surveying practice, in which it warns, and I quote, AI system outputs may not always be fully predictable or fully explainable, and in any event, there is an inherent risk of error and/or bias in AI systems due to errors and/or bias in the algorithms used. This could be due to variable training, data quality, biased programming, lack of data diversity, and/or the limitations of the AI system itself, as well as due to the AI system responding to or interacting with any biases of the firm in the context of its use. Sound advice, I would say. Doesn't sound like the kind of stuff you'd stake your professional reputations on, does it? As stated in the RICS statement, generative AI is only as good as the data it's fed on. What's the term? Rubbish in, rubbish out? So, if you're scratching your head about how just to take advantage of the AI revolution, assuming it arrives, the smart people are letting the early adopters make the mistakes, while getting their data into a form that any AI-based process or system that you may wish to adopt in the future can feed to its heart's content. And now, moving on to extensions of time. A contract period is agreed at the time of the contract signing, and delay in the contract period is the commonest and most costly problem in projects. JCT 24 defines practical completion as taking place on the date when, in the opinion of the architect, practical completion of the works is achieved. The term practical completion has been referred to the courts many times for interpretation, and the term practical has been adopted as it is clearly impossible to completely 100% finish a complex building project at a fixed point in time. If the contractor fails to complete within the contract period, they are in breach of contract and liable to pay damages to recompense the client. But it is a complex and difficult process to assess the amount of damages as well as proving loss. Therefore, JCT 24 has provision for liquidated damages to be levied, generally included as an amount per week. Liquidated damages must be a genuine pre-estimate of loss suffered in the event of a specific breach. In the past, some employers have seen liquidated damages as a punishment, but if it is determined that the level of damages is more like a punishment rather than compensation, then they are not enforced. The advantages of liquidated damages are that they enable the contractor to ascertain in advance their liability to the employer for late completion as part of their risk assessment when deciding whether or not to be included on the tender list. And in addition, they provide the employer with the reassurance of receiving immediate recompense in the event of delay. Apart from this, it is also an incentive for the contractor to finish the work on time. All standard forms of contract set out the processes for extension of time. Delay can be caused by the contractor or the employer, or beyond the control of either party. Delay on behalf of the contractor occurs when the contractor fails, perhaps due to a combination of lack of expertise, workforce, etc., to complete the work on time. Under these circumstances, the contractor has no real excuse for failure to complete and can expect to pay the full amount of damages stated in the contract. Delay can also be caused by the employer or their agents and directly employed contractors when work fails to be completed on time because the architect or some other member of the design team has failed to provide information requested by the contractor on time. Under these circumstances, the contract would be extended and in some cases would give grounds for a claim for additional costs from the contractor, although this is touched on later. In addition, delay can be caused by circumstances outside the control of either the contractor or the employer. For example, exceptionally inclement weather, riot, terrorism, etc., sometimes referred to as force majeure, and will normally result in an extension of time being granted. Now, a precise meaning of force majeure has eluded lawyers for years, but it is generally accepted to be a circumstance which no human foresight can provide against, and of which human prudence is not bound to recognise the possibility, also sometimes referred to as an act of God. JCT 24, clauses 227 and 228, refer to extensions of time. Applications for extension of time must be linked to a relevant event, as listed in JCT 24. For example, variations issued by the architect, instructions issued by the architect concerning discrepancies or divergence between documents such as contract drawings and bills of quantities, execution of works that have been included in the contract documents as provisional, then subsequently proves to be inaccurate in the nature or extent of work required, suspension of works by the contractor for non-payment by the employer, opening up of works for suspension unless the works or materials subsequently turn out to be faulty, etc., etc. JCT 24 added to the list of relevant events. There was a new entry for epidemics, and the existing entry for antiquities was enhanced. The discovery of asbestos, contaminated materials, or unexploded ordnance are now also relevant events. JCT 24 requires the contractor to report delays forthwith and as soon as possible, and applications for extension of time must be in writing with an estimate of the delay. In addition, the contractor is also required to submit details to substantiate the application for an extension, and the process should be repeated for each delay. The contract administrator must advise the contractor as soon as possible, and in any event within 8 weeks, that's the JCT 24, of the outcome. This period was reduced from 12 weeks in JCT 16. The advice to the contractor, which should be fair and reasonable, must contain the length of the extension and the relevant event to which the extension refers. If the application is accepted, the contract period is then extended and the contractor is relieved from paying damages. Importantly, following practical completion, the architect or contract administrator may review all extensions of time and adjust the overall completion date if reasonable. There is a popular belief that the granting of an extension of time gives an automatic right to submit a claim for loss and expense. It does not. It is merely to prevent the application of damages. Any application for a claim for damages must be submitted separately, together with supporting documents by the contractor, as early as possible, to allow for the impact of the delay to be mitigated. And finally this week, the question: PPP, public-private partnerships, will they make a comeback? Well, after almost a year of speculation, it really seems as though the pressure, or should I say the necessity, to reintroduce public-private partnerships is gaining momentum. PPP is a procurement model where the private sector not only builds public sector infrastructure, but also supplies the finance and management expertise. According to McKinsey, private investors are playing an increasingly important role in delivering infrastructure projects worldwide, with private infrastructure assets under management surging from $370 billion in 2016 to $1.1 trillion in 2024. The UK currently spends about £10 billion a year on existing PFI deals signed in years gone by, largely under New Labour, and these are likely to continue until 2050. With the problems faced by government in trying to finance its massive infrastructure programme, it's really no wonder PPP is on the table. Apparently we'll have to wait until the budget statement in late November to learn more details, but the early indications are that a mutual investment model, or MIM, developed by the Welsh Government, based on a 30-year contract, could be used for neighbourhood medical centres. The good news for government is that MIMs are generally accounted for off-balance sheet. This is a clever smoke and mirrors accounting device, which means the borrowing will not count as debt against the government's fiscal rules and black hole. It would give the impression that the system is churning out new infrastructure without cost to the taxpayer. Whether PPP will be extended to other infrastructure projects is in the balance. Well folks, that's all for this episode. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you for listening to the end. Barney and me admire your stamina. This has been a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. Barney and I would really appreciate it if you were to spread the word, subscribe, and if you have time, write a review. Until next time, bye for now.